The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning in Providence Municipal Court. The kind of quiet that settles over a space when everyone inside knows something heavy is about to unfold. Judge Frank Caprio sat at the bench, reading glasses perched on his nose, flipping through a case file with the kind of careful attention he gave every person who walked through his doors. His clerk called the next case, and the sound of hesitant footsteps echoed across the polished floor. A young woman approached the defendant's podium. She couldn't have been more than 28, maybe 30 at most. Her clothes were neat but worn, a pale blue cardigan over a white blouse, jeans that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her eyes, those eyes told a story before she even opened her mouth. They were red-rimmed, exhausted, carrying the weight of someone who hadn't slept properly in months, maybe years. She carried a small folder clutched against her chest like a shield. Judge Caprio looked up from the file and his expression softened immediately. He'd seen thousands of people stand where she was standing, and he'd learned long ago how to read a person in those first few seconds. This wasn't someone trying to game the system or make excuses. This was someone barely holding it together. "Good morning," he said gently, leaning forward slightly, his voice warm and grandfatherly. "What's your name?" "Rachel." "Rachel Moreno, Your Honor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again, a little stronger this time. "Rachel Moreno." "Rachel," Caprio repeated, nodding slowly, letting the name settle between them. "Okay, Rachel. I'm Judge Caprio. You know why you're here today?" She nodded quickly, almost too quickly, like she'd been dreading this moment for weeks. "Yes, Your Honor. Parking violations. Multiple parking violations." Caprio glanced down at the file again, his eyebrows raising just slightly. "Multiple is one way to put it." He flipped a page, then another, his expression growing more concerned with each turn. "Rachel, I'm looking at 17 unpaid parking tickets over the last 14 months. 17. And most of these are in the same area, same streets, around Rhode Island Hospital." He looked up at her, his eyes searching hers. "What's going on? Talk to me." Rachel's lips pressed together tightly. For a moment, it looked like she might cry, but she fought it back, blinking rapidly and looking down at her shoes. I can explain, Your Honor." "I want you to explain," Caprio said softly. "That's why I'm asking. I'm not here to judge you. Well, I mean, technically I am," he added with a small, kind smile, "but what I mean is, I want to understand. 17 tickets doesn't happen by accident. Something's going on in your life. Tell me what it is." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The prosecutor, a young man in a crisp suit, shifted his weight but said nothing. The clerk stopped typing. Even the bailiff, who'd seen hundreds of cases just like this, leaned in slightly, waiting. Rachel finally looked up, and when she spoke, her voice cracked. "My daughter, Your Honor. My daughter has leukemia." The words hung in the air like a weight dropped from a great height. Caprio's face transformed instantly. The professional mask of judicial neutrality fell away, replaced by raw, unfiltered compassion. He set the file down slowly, removed his glasses, and leaned forward even further, his full attention on this young mother standing before him. "Oh, Rachel," he said quietly, and those two words carried more empathy than most people hear in a lifetime. "How old is your daughter?" "She's 6, Rachel whispered. "Her name is Sofia. She was diagnosed 16 months ago. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia." Caprio nodded slowly, and anyone watching could see his mind working, connecting dots, understanding now why 17 parking tickets had piled up around a hospital. "And she's being treated at Rhode Island Hospital?" "Yes, Your Honor. She's been in and out constantly. Chemotherapy, transfusions, complications, infections. We've spent more time there than at home." Rachel's hands were shaking now, the folder trembling against her chest. The parking, I know I should have paid the meters, I know I should have moved the car, but sometimes I'd be with her for 12 hours, 14 hours, and I'd completely forget. Or I wouldn't have enough quarters. Or I'd run out to move it and she'd need me and I'd run back in and I lost track. I completely lost track. Judge Caprio sat back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him, his expression grave. The courtroom had gone completely silent. This wasn't about parking tickets anymore. This was about a mother watching her child fight for her life, about priorities that shifted so dramatically that parking meters became invisible in the face of survival. "How is Sofia doing now?" Caprio asked, and his voice was so gentle it was almost painful to hear. Rachel's composure finally cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand. She's responding to treatment. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. But it's been so hard, Your Honor. So incredibly hard. I can only imagine, Caprio said, and he meant it. I can only imagine what you've been going through. What you're still going through. He paused, studying her face, seeing the exhaustion, the fear, the determination that was keeping her upright. Are you here alone today? Yes, Your Honor. My mom is with Sofia right now. She's home today, Sofia. I mean, she had a good week, so they let her come home for a few days. My mom is watching her so I could come here. Caprio nodded, processing all of this information, and then he did something unexpected. He looked over at his clerk and said, "Get me the details on these tickets. Every single one. I want to know the dates, the times, the locations." Then he looked back at Rachel. "I'm going to tell you something right now, and I want you to listen to me carefully." Rachel straightened slightly, her eyes locked on his. "You are not a criminal," Caprio said firmly. "You are a mother doing what mothers do, putting your child first. Always. Without question. And I respect that more than you could possibly know." Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, studying Rachel Moreno with the kind of attention he reserved for cases that mattered most, which, in his courtroom, was every single one. But this one was different. He could feel it in his bones, that instinct that had guided him through decades on the bench. There was more to this story, layers that needed to be peeled back gently, carefully, with the kind of compassion that separated justice from bureaucracy. "Rachel, I want to understand your situation completely before we proceed," he said, his tone conversational, like they were sitting over coffee rather than standing in a courtroom. "Tell me about your life right now. Paint me a picture. You mentioned your mother is with Sofia today. What about Sofia's father? Are you getting support?" Rachel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Caprio caught it immediately. He'd seen that look before, the look of someone navigating loss or abandonment, trying to hold together pieces that didn't quite fit anymore. Sofia's father. He left about 6 months after the diagnosis, Rachel said quietly, and there was no bitterness in her voice, only exhaustion. He couldn't handle it. The hospitals, the uncertainty, the fear. He just left. Stopped answering calls, stopped coming around. We're divorced now. He doesn't pay child support. He doesn't ask about Sofia. It's like we don't exist to him anymore. The courtroom felt even heavier now. The prosecutor looked down at his notes, suddenly very interested in them. The clerk stopped what she was doing. Caprio's expression darkened slightly, not with anger but with deep sadness for this woman who'd been abandoned at the moment she needed support most. "So you're doing this alone," Caprio said softly. "Working, caring for Sofia, managing medical appointments, everything all by yourself?" "With my mom's help," Rachel added quickly, as if she didn't want to take credit she felt wasn't entirely hers. "My mom has been amazing. She moved in with us after the diagnosis. She watches Sofia when I have to work, she comes to appointments with us when she can, she cooks, she cleans. I don't know what I'd do without her. But she's 72, Your Honor. She has her own health issues, arthritis, high blood pressure. She does so much, but I can't put everything on her. What do you do for work? Caprio asked, and his questioning had that gentle rhythm to it, like he was conducting an interview rather than a hearing, drawing out information not to trap but to understand. I'm a dental assistant, Rachel said. I work at a clinic in Pawtucket. I was full-time before Sofia got sick, but I had to go down to part-time after the diagnosis. My boss has been incredibly understanding, but I've missed so much work. Emergency hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions that run long, infections that require immediate admission. I'm surprised I still have a job, honestly. Caprio nodded slowly, taking this all in. And the medical bills? Insurance? Rachel let out a long, shaky breath. We have insurance through my job, but it doesn't cover everything. There are copays, medications that aren't fully covered, experimental treatments they won't approve. I've gone through all my savings. I took out a personal loan last year that I'm still paying off. I've sold things. My car was too expensive to maintain, so I sold it and bought an older one. We cut every expense we could. My mom uses her Social Security to help. We're barely making it month to month. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of someone processing not just information but the weight of human suffering. When he looked up again, his eyes were moist, though his voice remained steady. Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me, he said. These parking tickets, the total fine amount is substantial. Over $2,000 with the accumulated penalties. Do you have any ability to pay this right now? Any ability at all? Rachel's face crumpled slightly, and she shook her head. No, Your Honor. I don't. I've been terrified about coming here today because I knew I couldn't pay. I thought maybe I could set up a payment plan, maybe $50 a month or something, but even that. She trailed off, the impossibility of her situation hanging in the air between them. I've been having panic attacks about this. Waking up at 3 in the morning, thinking about these tickets, about what happens if I can't pay, if my license gets suspended, if I can't get Sofia to her appointments. It's been eating me alive. Caprio set his glasses down on the bench and folded his hands, his expression deeply thoughtful. Let me tell you something about this court, about how I see my job. I'm not here just to enforce rules and collect fines. I'm here to serve justice, and justice means understanding context. It means seeing the human being standing in front of me, not just a case number. You're not a parking scofflaw, Rachel. You're not someone who deliberately ignored the law out of convenience or disregard. You're a mother in crisis, trying to save your daughter's life, and somehow you're supposed to remember parking meters while your child is hooked up to chemotherapy. That's not justice. That's not even reasonable. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and this time she didn't fight them. They spilled over, running down her cheeks as she listened to this judge, this stranger who somehow saw her, really saw her, in a way that made her feel less alone than she'd felt in months. Your Honor, she started, but Caprio gently raised a hand. Let me finish, he said kindly. I want to know more about Sofia. Tell me about her. What's she like when she's not in the hospital? What makes her smile? The question was so unexpected, so human, that Rachel actually laughed through her tears, a small, surprised sound. She's the light of my life, Your Honor. Even through all of this, she's so brave. She loves to draw. She draws pictures for all her nurses, for the doctors, even for the other kids in the cancer ward. She wants to be an artist when she grows up. Or a veterinarian. It changes every week. Rachel smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd shown since entering the courtroom. She loves animals. We have a cat named Mr. Whiskers. She named him when she was 3, and that cat knows when she's having a bad day. He'll curl up next to her and just stay there, purring, keeping her company. She says he's her best friend. Caprio smiled too, a warm, grandfatherly smile that transformed his entire face. She sounds wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And stronger than most adults I know. Fighting what she's fighting at 6 years old. That's a warrior right there. She is, Rachel agreed, her voice filled with pride and pain in equal measure. She asks me sometimes why this happened to her, why she has to be sick when other kids get to play and go to school normally. And I don't have an answer, Your Honor. I don't know what to tell her except that we're going to fight this together, that we're going to get through it, and that she's the bravest person I've ever known. Judge Caprio picked up the case file again, but this time he looked at it differently, not as a collection of violations but as a documentation of a family's struggle, a timeline of fear and hope measured in parking tickets accumulated near a hospital. He flipped through the pages slowly, and then he paused, his finger stopping on one particular entry. Judge Caprio's finger remained on the page, his brow furrowing as he read something in the case file. The courtroom watched him, and Rachel watched him most intently of all, trying to read his expression, trying to understand what he'd found. There was something in his face now, not concern exactly, but recognition, like he'd just connected dots that changed the entire picture. Rachel, he said slowly, looking up from the file, I'm seeing here that several of these tickets were issued on the same days. Multiple tickets, same location, different times. He paused, letting that sink in. That means you were at the hospital for so long that the parking enforcement officers came through multiple times in a single day. Is that right? Rachel nodded, fresh tears welling up. Yes, Your Honor. There were days when Sofia's treatments would have complications, or her counts would drop, or she'd develop a fever, and we couldn't leave. We'd be admitted for days at a time. I'd completely forget about the car. It wasn't important compared to whether my daughter was going to make it through the night. Caprio set the file down, and when he looked at Rachel again, there was something in his eyes that the regular attendees of his courtroom recognized, that particular expression that meant he was about to do something unexpected, something that would remind everyone why his clips went viral, why people across the country knew his name and associated it with compassion. Tell me about the worst day, he said quietly. In all of this, in all these months of treatment and fear and hospital visits, what was the single worst day? The question landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through Rachel's composure. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they were distant, looking at something the rest of the courtroom couldn't see. March 15th, she said, her voice barely audible. This past March. Sofia had developed sepsis. Her immune system was so compromised from the chemo that an infection took hold and just exploded through her system. We were in the emergency room at 2 a.m. Her fever was 105. She was delirious, crying, saying things that didn't make sense. The doctors were rushing around, pumping her full of antibiotics, doing blood cultures, and I stood there, watching my baby fight for her life, thinking this was it. Thinking I was going to lose her. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the prosecutor had stopped looking at his notes, his professional detachment cracked by the raw honesty of Rachel's testimony. They got her stabilized, Rachel continued, but she was in the ICU for 8 days after that. I didn't leave the hospital once during those 8 days. Not once. I slept in a chair next to her bed, I ate from vending machines, I wore the same clothes for 3 days straight until my mom brought me fresh ones. And the car, she laughed bitterly, the car sat in the parking lot the entire time, accumulating tickets. I got 5 tickets during those 8 days. 5. And I didn't even know until weeks later when they showed up in the mail. Judge Caprio's hand had moved to his chest, pressed over his heart, and his eyes were visibly wet now. He made no attempt to hide his emotion, no attempt to maintain judicial distance. This was what made him different, what made him special, his willingness to feel, to connect, to recognize that the law served people, not the other way around. Were you alone during those 8 days? he asked. Was your mother there with you? She came when she could, Rachel said, but she had to go home to take care of the apartment, to feed the cat, to handle things. And honestly, Your Honor, I needed to be alone with Sofia. I needed to be the one there when she opened her eyes, the one holding her hand, the one telling her everything was going to be okay even when I didn't believe it myself. That's what mothers do, right? We lie to our children to give them hope. We tell them everything's going to be fine when we're absolutely terrified inside. Caprio nodded slowly, deeply moved. That's not lying, Rachel. That's love. That's faith. That's being the anchor your child needs when everything else is unstable. He paused, then asked, and she pulled through. She recovered from the sepsis? She did, Rachel said, and for the first time, there was something like relief in her voice. She's tough. Tougher than me. Tougher than anyone should have to be at 6 years old. She came out of it, and the doctors said it was touch and go, that we were lucky, that she's a fighter. And now she's doing better. Her latest scans showed the cancer is responding to treatment, that we might actually beat this thing. The hope in her voice was fragile, like she was afraid to fully embrace it in case it shattered. Judge Caprio picked up the file again and flipped to a specific page, studying it intently. Then he looked at the dates of the tickets, cross-referencing them with something only he could see. His expression shifted again, becoming more focused, more determined. Rachel, I want to ask you something, and I need you to trust me with this, he said. During all of this, the diagnosis, the treatment, the crisis moments, the fear, have you had any support from anywhere? Any organizations, charities, community support? Or has it just been you and your mother carrying this alone? Rachel hesitated, then shook her head. Not really. The hospital has social workers who've been helpful with paperwork and resources, and there's a foundation that helps with some of the medical costs, but day to day? It's just us. Just me and my mom and Sofia, trying to survive one day at a time. People say they want to help, but when it comes down to it, when months turn into a year and more, people move on with their lives. They have to. I understand that. But it means we're pretty much on our own. Caprio's jaw tightened, and for a moment, something like anger flashed across his face, not at Rachel, but at the situation, at the unfairness of it all, at a system that could let a mother and daughter fight this battle with so little support. That's about to change, he said quietly, and there was steel in his voice now, determination. Rachel, I want you to listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to do, what I'm going to tell you, I want you to understand that it comes from a place of complete conviction that this is the right thing, the only thing, that makes any sense given what you've told me today. Rachel straightened slightly, confused but hopeful, not daring to imagine what he might mean. Caprio leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him on the bench, his eyes locked on hers. These 17 parking tickets, this $2,000 in fines and penalties, I'm dismissing all of it. Every single ticket. Every single fine. You owe nothing. Zero. Consider it done. The courtroom erupted in a collective intake of breath. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The prosecutor looked up sharply, surprise evident on his face. The clerk actually stopped typing mid-word. Your Honor, Rachel started, but her voice broke completely, dissolving into sobs. But I'm not done, Caprio continued, his voice rising slightly to carry over Rachel's crying. I'm not done because dismissing tickets doesn't help with what you're really facing. It doesn't help with the medical bills, the lost income, the everyday struggle of keeping your family afloat while your daughter fights for her life. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench, something he rarely did in the middle of a hearing. The movement was deliberate, purposeful, and it commanded the attention of everyone in the courtroom. He walked down from the elevated platform, stepping into the well of the court, closing the physical distance between himself and Rachel Moreno. It was an unprecedented gesture, one that broke every convention of courtroom formality, but no one moved to stop him. This was his courtroom, his rules, and everyone present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Rachel," he said, now standing just a few feet from her, speaking to her not as a judge to a defendant but as one human being to another, "I want to tell you a story. Is that okay?" Rachel nodded, wiping at her tears with her sleeve, completely overwhelmed by what was happening. She couldn't quite process that all the tickets were dismissed, that the weight she'd been carrying for months had just been lifted, and now this judge, this remarkable man, was standing in front of her with something else to say. "When I was a young man, younger than you are now, my father got very sick," Caprio began, his voice softer now, intimate. "Cancer. This was a long time ago, when treatment options weren't what they are today. And I watched my mother do exactly what you've been doing, sacrifice everything, every comfort, every personal need, to care for the person she loved most in the world. She was at that hospital every single day. She held his hand through every treatment. She never complained, never asked for help, never admitted how hard it was. She just did it because that's what love looks like when everything else falls away." Rachel was listening intently now, her crying subsided into quiet attention, drawn into this unexpected moment of shared humanity. "My father survived," Caprio continued, "and I've never forgotten what my mother went through during that time. How she became invisible to everyone except our family. How the world kept turning while she stood still, holding our family together through sheer force of will. And I promised myself then that if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, someone sacrificing everything for love, I would do it without hesitation." He paused, his eyes bright with emotion. "You remind me of my mother, Rachel. That same strength. That same quiet heroism. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let you walk out of this courtroom without doing everything in my power to help you." The emotion in the room was palpable. The clerk was openly crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The prosecutor had set down his pen entirely, watching this unfold with something like awe on his face. The bailiff, a gruff man who'd served in this courtroom for 15 years, was blinking rapidly, fighting back his own tears. "Your Honor, I don't understand," Rachel said quietly. "You've already dismissed the tickets. You've already helped me more than you can know." Caprio smiled, that warm grandfatherly smile that had become his trademark. "The tickets were easy, Rachel. That was just doing what's right, what's fair. But I told you at the beginning of this conversation, I told you I wanted to help you. And I meant it." He turned slightly, addressing the courtroom at large. "Some of you might know this, some might not, but I've been involved with various charitable organizations in Providence for most of my adult life. I believe in community. I believe in people helping people. And I believe that when you have connections, when you have the ability to make a phone call that might change someone's life, you have a responsibility to make that call." He turned back to Rachel, and his expression became more serious, more focused. "Rachel, I have a friend, a very good friend, who runs the Tony Gasparo Foundation. You might have heard of it. They provide financial assistance to families dealing with pediatric cancer. Medical bills, living expenses, emergency needs. They help families exactly like yours survive the impossible burden of childhood cancer treatment." Rachel's eyes widened. She had heard of the foundation, had even looked into applying for assistance months ago, but had been overwhelmed by the application process, by the documentation required, by the sheer exhaustion of adding one more thing to her already impossible schedule. "I'm going to tell you something right now, and I want you to trust me," Caprio said, and his voice dropped to that intimate, personal tone again. "The title you probably saw online for this video, I can end this with one call, that's not dramatic exaggeration. That's a fact. I can pick up my phone right now, call Tony Gasparo directly, and by the end of today, you will have support. Real, tangible, financial support to help with your medical bills, your living expenses, whatever you need to keep fighting for Sofia without drowning in debt and fear." Rachel's hand went to her mouth again, and fresh tears began streaming down her face. "Your Honor, you would do that? You would really do that?" "I'm not going to do it," Caprio said firmly. I've already done it. I called Tony this morning after I reviewed your case file and saw what you were dealing with. I told him your story. I hope you don't mind, and he's already approved emergency assistance. He's expecting to hear from you today. My clerk has his direct number. You'll call him after we finish here, and he's going to help you. Not maybe. Not possibly. He's going to help you. The courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause, something that never happened in Judge Caprio's court, but no one moved to stop it. The sound washed over Rachel like a wave, and she covered her face with both hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that were equal parts relief, gratitude, and the release of months of pent-up fear and stress. Caprio waited for the applause to die down, then gently touched Rachel's shoulder. "There's more," he said quietly, and somehow the courtroom managed to become even more silent, if that was possible. "I also made a call to the parking authority, to the director, who I've known for 20 years. Every hospital in Providence is going to implement a new policy, effective immediately: extended parking grace periods for parents of children receiving long-term treatment. No parent should ever have to choose between being with their sick child and feeding a parking meter. That ends now. It should have ended a long time ago, but it ends now." Rachel looked up at him, her face a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. "You did all of this? For me? For Sofia? For people you don't even know?" "I did it because it's right," Caprio said simply. "Because you deserved better than what you've been dealing with. Because Sofia deserves a mother who isn't paralyzed by fear of parking tickets while her daughter is fighting cancer. Because sometimes the law needs to serve justice, and justice means seeing the human being, not just the violation." He paused, then smiled gently. "And because maybe, just maybe, my mother was watching from wherever she is now, making sure I remembered what she taught me about compassion." The prosecutor stood up, something that drew everyone's attention. He looked young, maybe in his early 30s, probably handling dozens of these cases every week. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "Your Honor, if I may, the state has no objection to the dismissal of these citations. In fact, I'd like to formally recommend that this case be sealed from Ms. Moreno's record entirely, as if it never existed. She's been through enough. The state agrees that this is the appropriate resolution." Caprio nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate that." He turned back to Rachel. "Do you understand what's happening here, Rachel? Do you understand that when you walk out of this courtroom, you're walking out with a clean slate, with support waiting for you, with one less burden on your shoulders?" Rachel nodded, unable to speak, tears flowing freely down her face. She clutched that folder to her chest like a lifeline, but her posture had changed. The defeated slump of her shoulders when she'd first entered was gone, replaced by something straighter, stronger, like someone who'd just been reminded that the world still contained kindness. Judge Caprio walked back to his bench, but he didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he stood there for a moment, his hands resting on the polished wood, looking out at the courtroom, at Rachel still crying softly at the defendant's podium, at his clerk wiping tears from her own eyes, at the prosecutor who'd shown unexpected compassion, at the handful of people in the gallery who'd come for their own cases and instead witnessed something they'd never forget. "You know," he began, his voice carrying that particular quality it got when he was about to share something important, something from the heart, "I've been doing this job for a very long time. Decades. I've seen thousands of people stand where you're standing, Rachel. Thousands of cases, thousands of stories, thousands of moments where the law intersects with human life in ways that can either help or harm, heal or hurt. And every single time I'm reminded that behind every case file, every citation, every violation, there's a human being with a story. A life. Struggles that the paperwork can't possibly capture." He picked up Rachel's case file one more time, holding it up so the courtroom could see it. "This folder right here says 17 parking violations. That's what the system sees. That's what the computer records. 17 violations, $2,000 in fines, a delinquent account that needs resolution. But you know what this folder really contains? It contains 14 months of a mother's love. It contains countless hours spent at a hospital bedside. It contains fear and hope and exhaustion and determination. It contains Sofia, a 6-year-old girl fighting for her life while her mother fights beside her. That's what's really in this folder, and that's what I choose to see. Rachel was nodding, still crying, but there was something different in her face now, not just relief but recognition, the profound experience of being truly seen, truly understood, by someone in a position of authority who could have just processed her case like any other but chose instead to look deeper. Rachel, I want you to do something for me, Caprio continued, setting the folder down and leaning forward on his hands. I want you to go home today and tell Sofia about what happened here. Not the details about parking tickets and fines, that's not important. But tell her about people helping people. Tell her that even when things seem hopeless, even when you're carrying burdens that feel too heavy to bear, there are still people in this world who care, who see you, who want to help. Tell her that kindness still exists, that compassion still matters, that we're not alone even when it feels like we are. I will, Your Honor, Rachel managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. I promise I will. And I want you to do something else, Caprio said, his tone becoming more serious. I want you to stop apologizing. Stop feeling guilty. Stop thinking that you've done something wrong by prioritizing your daughter's life over parking regulations. You haven't. You've done exactly what any loving parent would do, what any loving parent should do. Your instincts were correct. Your choices were right. You put your child first, and there is no ticket, no fine, no regulation in the world that's more important than that. The prosecutor nodded in agreement, and even the bailiff, who rarely showed any reaction to proceedings, was nodding along. This wasn't just about one case anymore, this was about a principle, a philosophy of justice that recognized humanity before bureaucracy, compassion before compliance. Now, Caprio said, straightening up, let me tell you what's going to happen next, because I want you to leave here with clear instructions and no confusion. First, my clerk is going to give you Tony Gasparo's direct phone number. You're going to call him today, not tomorrow, not next week, today, and he's going to walk you through getting the financial assistance you need. He already knows your situation, he's already approved preliminary support, and he's expecting your call. Second, all 17 parking tickets are dismissed, completely and permanently. They will not appear on your record. They will not affect your license or your insurance. They're gone. As far as the system is concerned, they never existed. Rachel was nodding, trying to take it all in, trying to remember every detail through the fog of overwhelming emotion. Third, Caprio continued, the parking authority is implementing that new policy I mentioned, extended grace periods for parents of children in long-term care. It's going to take a few weeks to roll out officially, but it's happening. So if you find yourself back at that hospital, if Sofia needs treatment, if you need to park and stay as long as she needs you, you do it without fear. You do it without watching the clock or worrying about meters. You be the mother you've been being, which is exactly the mother Sofia needs. I don't know what to say, Rachel whispered. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. Nothing feels like enough. Caprio smiled that warm smile again, the one that had made him beloved not just in Providence but around the world. Then don't say anything, he said gently. Just go home. Hug your daughter. Hug your mother. Take care of yourselves. And when Sofia beats this thing, notice I said when, not if, when she beats this cancer and she grows up to be that artist or veterinarian she dreams about being, you remember this day. You remember that people cared. That the system worked the way it was supposed to work. That justice meant seeing you, not just processing you. He paused, then addressed the entire courtroom, his voice rising slightly. That's what this court is about. That's what justice should always be about. Not blind adherence to rules, not revenue collection, not punishment for punishment's sake. It's about people. It's about recognizing that laws serve humanity, not the other way around. And when we lose sight of that, when we start treating human beings like case numbers and file folders, we've lost everything that makes this system worth having. The courtroom was absolutely still, hanging on every word. This wasn't just a ruling anymore, this was a philosophy, a worldview, a reminder of what public service could look like when done with genuine compassion and humanity. Rachel Moreno, Judge Caprio said formally, standing straight now, his voice taking on the official tone of final judgment, "This case is dismissed in its entirety. All fines are waived. All citations are removed from your record. You are free to go with the court's sincere best wishes for Sofia's continued recovery and your family's well-being. This hearing is concluded." He raised his gavel and brought it down once, the sharp crack echoing through the courtroom like punctuation on a story that would be told and retold for years to come. But before Rachel could move, before she could gather her things and walk away, Caprio did something else unexpected. He stepped down from the bench again and walked over to her, and in front of the entire courtroom, he gave her a gentle, grandfatherly hug. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Both of you. You're going to make it through this. I believe that with everything I am." Rachel hugged him back, this stranger who'd shown her more compassion in 1 hour than she'd experienced in months of struggle, and she whispered back, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for seeing Sofia. Thank you for caring." When they separated, Caprio looked her in the eyes one more time. "Go be with your daughter. That's where you belong. And if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, this court, this judge, this community, we're here. You're not alone anymore. You never have to be alone again." Rachel nodded, gathered her folder, and turned to leave. But before she reached the courtroom doors, she stopped and turned back. Judge Caprio had returned to his bench and was preparing to call the next case, returning to the routine business of his courtroom. But he looked up when he sensed her standing there. "Your Honor," Rachel called out, her voice stronger now, carrying across the courtroom, "Sofia's favorite color is purple. And she loves butterflies. When she draws pictures for people, she always puts butterflies in them because she says they represent hope, something beautiful that comes after a dark time." Caprio's face lit up with that smile again, and he nodded. "Then I'm going to look for butterflies everywhere now. And every time I see one, I'll think of Sofia and hope and beautiful things that come after dark times. You tell her that for me. Tell her Judge Caprio is looking for butterflies." Rachel smiled through her tears, a real smile, genuine and full of gratitude, and then she walked out of the courtroom. The doors closed behind her with a soft click, and for a moment, no one in the courtroom moved. They were all processing what they'd witnessed, the kind of moment that reminded them why they believed in justice, in humanity, in the possibility that systems could work for people rather than against them. Judge Caprio sat at his bench, took a deep breath, and looked at his clerk. "Next case," he said quietly, and his voice carried the weight of someone who understood that every person who walked through those doors carried their own story, their own struggles, their own need to be seen and heard and treated with dignity. And he was ready to do it all again, as many times as it took, for as long as he sat on that bench. Because that's what justice looked like when it was done right. That's what compassion looked like when it had the power to change lives. And that's what one call, the right call, made with conviction and love, could accomplish when someone in a position of authority chose to see the human being behind the case number. The courtroom returned to its normal rhythm, cases moving forward, lives intersecting with the law in countless small ways. But everyone who'd been present that morning knew they'd witnessed something special, something that would stay with them. They'd seen what happened when the system worked the way it was supposed to work, when a judge remembered that his job wasn't just to enforce rules but to serve justice. And somewhere in Providence, a mother drove home to her daughter, lighter than she'd been in months, ready to tell her about butterflies and hope and the kindness of strangers who became something more, who became proof that even in the darkest times, there are people who care, who see, who help. That was Judge Caprio's courtroom. That was his legacy. And that was why, long after his retirement, people would remember not just his rulings but his humanity, his compassion, His unwavering belief that behind every case was a person deserving of dignity, respect, and sometimes when circumstances demanded it, mercy that changed everything.